Hello YouTube and welcome to ClassOfFour. I am student 4 talking about how to write essays. And how to write essays will be split into two main parts or videos. The first part is the preparation process, and this has 6 main components to it, which I'll be talking about in this video. And the second part, or second video, is how to write an individual paper with the preparation that you've done. And that will be covered in a separate video. The link will be posted in the description as soon as that video is uploaded. So the first part, the preparation. I like to think of it as having 6 main components, and this has worked well for me before. It might not work well for everyone, but I'm suggesting that you do this. The first component is the topic. The second part is the brainstorm. The third part is the research. And the fourth part is the basic point formulation. The fifth part is the sub-point formulation. And the sixth and final part is coming to write the actual essay. And so the topic. The topic is the first step to writing an essay. This is where you'll be getting the main topic, theme, or question to write about. And now you need to figure out what you'll be writing about the particular topic you have gotten. And the most important thing to do with the topic is to keep it in mind at all times while working on an essay. If need be, you might have to write it down on a piece of paper while you're doing research so you don't forget what you're talking about. And word of caution, if an essay does not continually address the main topic or question, then the essay will be very, very ineffective, and that is simply not an acceptable thing. The brainstorm is the part where you take all the prior knowledge you have about the topic and write them down. You are not coming up with points as of right now. You should be organizing this knowledge systematically in a method that makes a lot of sense to you. And a flowchart or pages of dot notes or whatever works. I like to use dot notes because it works. Some people I've seen before have used flowcharts. And we've all had similar levels of success here. This organizational method should easily show you how the different parts of the topic, as far as you can understand, fit together and relate to each other. And it is this relation to each other that you'll be using to come up with the main points later on. Now, using this prior knowledge, you can figure out what you need to research in order to fully understand what you'll be writing about. If you have all the knowledge you need to understand the essay's topic, then you can actually start writing the essay from this step. If not, then you'll have to carry out some research and keep listening to me or watching. So the third part now is the research process. And research gathering can occur in 2 main stages. And you might not come across one of them in particular at all times. There are primary sources and secondary sources to keep in mind. Primary sources are those that are from first-hand records, a transcript of a speech or a record of a presidential address or replications of letters or even newspapers from the era you are discussing in the essay can all be very valid primary sources. The value of having researched and included primary sources in your paper is that your essay's arguments will be made even stronger, as there is direct analysis of events and artifacts from the era. And secondary resources are slightly weaker in terms of backing up your argument, but still valid. And these are those that interpret and analyze primary sources, historians' writings on books or papers, an academic's analytical writings about an influential person's speech or experiment, and newspaper articles can all count as secondary sources. And it is very important to note that many sources can be regarded as both primary and secondary, and the specific classification of primary or secondary depends on the context in which the essay is being approached. For example, if you're writing an essay about a film, then the film itself would be the primary source, while an article written about the film would be a secondary source. However, if you're looking at how films are viewed in society, then the same article that would have been a secondary source in the first example would now be a primary source. Now, as you research, you should always be trying to read or view each source at least 3 times. The first time you see a source, you should go through it to gain basic context as to what the source is about. The second time through, you should be making notes about the important ideas in the source and write down appropriate reference notes, the publisher, the authors or authors' names, the date of publication, and several more notes of reference according to the reference format you are using. There'll be links to several popular reference formats in the description. The third time you see the source should be when you are referencing it while writing the essay. It is always a good idea to double check your sources just to be sure that you are not missing anything more that could be very useful for a paper, and of course that you are referencing the correct part of the source. Now, there are several good places to find appropriate sources: the library on the internet and experts on the topic. The most obvious place to look is the library. Many public libraries often carry at least one or two books on the topic you will be writing about, and so visiting the library and looking at the books there could be very helpful. And needless to say, asking a librarian for help finding sources can be useful, as you may be able to find more sources related to your topic, but just in different ways than you had originally expected. Libraries also often carry secondary sources unless you're writing about a story or novel. Now, if a public library does not have all of the resources you need to write your paper or essay, then you might want to look at getting into university libraries or reference libraries which have been constructed for that specific purpose of helping people with research. Now, the internet is another very good source. There are many databases that can offer primary sources, and many university websites offer a very good primary and secondary sources for free online. Newspapers as well have online articles which could be very helpful in gathering basic information before you start, or the article itself might be of particular use for you in writing the paper. And furthermore, it is now possible to search for papers on scientific experiments or historical analyses that have been published online, and these may help you with the essay you are writing. The next good source is experts on the topic you are writing about. If you can contact anyone who are very knowledgeable about the topic you are writing, then emailing them or giving them a phone call might prove very invaluable to your research. These people could supply more books, articles, or even first-hand information about your topic, or even help you come up with good points to write. Of course, it can be very hard to find someone who knows a lot about the particular topic you're writing. And in the case that you do come across such a person, they might be very busy, but it never hurts to ask or look around. Now, you might have to write the essay in class or with a very limited amount of time and resources. So if that's the case, you might want to skip the research component or try to carry it out in advance as best as you can before writing the actual essay. This brings us to step 4, the basic point formulation. There are, I would say, at least 2 main components to coming up with your basic points: the thesis and the conclusion. The thesis is where you come up with the most basic points of your paper. These are the most important and biggest ideas that you will be talking about in the essay. And these must and should be based on your research and brainstorming, and they must absolutely link back to your main topic. These points that are being covered in your thesis should also cover a very specific area of the topic each, and make sense on its own as a separate argument. Furthermore, there needs to be a lot of research, or proof as I like to call it now, that backs up each point, because without enough proof, a point is very weak, it becomes invalid, and it just makes the whole essay look a lot weaker. And if that happens in a school situation, you might be losing a lot of marks. And after several points have been found, normally 2 or 3, it is very difficult to write with less than 2 or more than 4. The thesis statement can be made. The thesis statement is a sentence that summarizes what you will be saying about the topic. It should very briefly include the titles of your points and the main themes you will be examining about the topic. Now, the conclusion. You should in fact come up with at least a basic idea for the conclusion before you write the essay. And this conclusion includes generally a restatement of the thesis, but it should also have some sort of bigger picture idea about the thesis, and this will be covered in more detail in the second part of this guide. And you can also begin coming up with subpoints, which is the fifth category that I have outlined. And by subpoints, I mean that there should be several minor points that act to back up the large points that your essay is made up of. So for each major point, and let's say there are 3 major points, you should have about 2 subpoints to back it up. You might have more or less depending on the particular point. Now, these subpoints should only be about 4 to 5 sentences in length, and they need to have pieces of evidence from research to make them very strong. Now, some people can tend to write about the subpoints more than they write about the main points. I have done this a lot in the past. This is generally not a very good idea. And you should always try to keep in mind that the subpoints are not the main focus of the essay, and these should only act as pillars to strengthen the argument or statement being made in the main points. And they should always link back to the main points, which should always link back to your thesis, which must of course be obviously linked to the topic you're writing about. The sixth part is writing the essay. This is where you write the essay, which is covered in part 2, link in the description. And then you should edit it, and this writing process is covered in the next video. Thank you for listening.